Hello guys and welcome back to the Apex Online Racing Hype Energy F1 Season 15 Championship. Back today for round number 7. It is time for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And so far this season, on the Xbox side of things, it has been utter domination from the Flying Finn. It's 6 victories from 6. And, well, if he does so today, it would of course be 7 from 7 at a track which he took pole and the victory last season ahead of Veloci Limitless and RG Matiz. And, well, this season he got off to the perfect start by taking pole position by just over 1/10 of a second from Surprised Me in the Toro Rosso. Taking a surprise third in qualifying was TOR Leopard, just ahead of NLR Evo in the Ferrari. Cyril Hamilton, the teammate of Leopard, put an impressive lap in to get into P5, just ahead of the Flying Finn's teammate STS F1 Alonso in P6. It's an all-Renault fourth row of the grid, with VSR Simon just ahead of TRL Martin, with Drawmaster and Veloci Limitless rounding out the top 10. And getting into the second half of the order, it's notable that all 16 drivers were within 0.8 of a second of the pole time, showing just how tightly packed the field was. And without further ado, let's get in now to the side-by-side qualifying comparison. The comparison for this Hungarian Grand Prix sees NLR Evo up against Drawmaster. Both drivers now heading down into turn 1, going over 300 kilometers per hour for using that 100 meter board as a reference to brake. Evo taking a slightly tighter line into the first turn before they both get on the DRS through the right kink of turn 2 and head underneath the bridge before braking at around 75 meters for turn 3. It's a big overtaking opportunity come race day, but both keep it neat and tidy in qualifying before heading through the right kink of turn 4 and up towards the brow of the hill at the end of the first sector as they both flick it into turn 6, heading down one gear into 6th. You can see Evo had that 1/10 of a second gap at the end of the first sector. Now going through turn 7, both keeping it neat and tidy for braking into the chicane of turn 8 and 9, trying not to lock the right front tyre. Drawmaster there kept it in a gear lower than Evo and does so as well for this turn 10 and 11 left-right combination. And now it's just about keeping it within the track limits in turns 12 and 13. Heading towards the end of the second sector now, you can see Evo is still ahead by around 0.2 of a second. Heading down into the heavy braking zone of 14, and Drawmaster there and Evo going into third gear before now the left hairpin at turn 15. Just keeping it neat and tidy through here once again for the final turn at 16. Trying to get as narrow a line as possible and pick up the throttle as soon as you can. And that is a lap around the Hungaroring with NLR Evo taking this qualifying comparison as well as P4 on the grid. Getting then into the race at an overcast Hungaroring, which had no chance of rain, but it was going to be an intriguing battle this afternoon. And as the drivers got underway, there was plenty of position swapping into turn 1 in the back end of the top 10. But there was one significant move that happened at the front end of the order, and that was the Toro Rosso of Surprised Me getting into the lead and ahead of the Flying Finn into turn 1. NLR Evo also looking at the Mercedes driver, but Finn did manage to hold P2. Surprise, just about getting the lead then, but it was going to be a long 35 laps ahead of the drivers. It was a crazy battle for the top 6, with Cyril Hamilton heading the train Limitless going for the move, but the Ferrari man had already made up 3 positions at the start of this race, as had STS F1 Alonso, who was up from 6th to 3rd. Despite making up 3 positions though, a lost front wing end plate for Limitless meant that he was passed by TRL Martin towards the end of the first lap and decided to come into the pit lane, only for his pit crew not to change his front wing, which was terrible luck for the Veloci driver, and he ended up retiring as a result. On to lap 3 then, and Limitless's teammate NLR Evo was looking very racy around the Hungaroring, trying to go for a move on the second Mercedes of STS F1 Alonso into turn 1 and then into turn 3, but it was very well held by the Mercedes man, and this battle continued throughout the next couple of laps, seen here on lap 4 with some fantastic driving from the two of them. But as the laps went on, the battle for third went right the way down the order, all the way into P8. Almost a snake of cars there coming through this final sector, showing how difficult it is to overtake around here. The battle continued between the two of them on lap 6, and after going side by side almost through turn 3, a small lag spike meant that NLR Evo was lagged off the circuit and down from P4 into P6, meaning huge disappointment for the German driver. Despite this setback, Evo wasted no time in getting past CRL Hamilton for P5, and looked as if he was going to be eyeing up Hamilton's teammate TOR Leopard before too long. Sure enough, just a lap later, and Evo was right on the tail of Leopard, trying to go round the outside of this turn 3, which had already become quite notorious as an overtaking opportunity for the drivers, but Leopard held firm, and it was looking like a great performance by the Williams driver. STS F1 Alonso was still clinging on to the podium positions in P3, but he still had a number of drivers in pursuit of him on lap 10. It was almost a question of who was going to blink first in this group, and it turned out to be CRL Hamilton who bit the bullet and decided to come into the pit lane, surely triggering some more drivers to do so in the following laps. Going now to the battle for 10th place between EVR Morso and Reynolds. Morso went for a move down the inside at the end of lap 11, only for Reynolds to completely close the door on him, which then caused further carnage, causing VSL Simon to lose his front wing. It capped off what was a pretty dismal afternoon for those drivers, not being able to cling onto the back of the pack for the top 8, and Reynolds went spinning further, showing that it was going to be a difficult rest of the afternoon for him. Back towards the front then, at the end of lap 12, Evo decided to come in to the pit lane, along with STS F1 Alonso and VSR Simon. But the question was, where would they emerge in relation to the drivers that they've been battling? The answer was, quite a way behind the likes of TOR Leopard and CRL Hamilton. Hamilton, though, did have a 3-second penalty at this point, meaning they'd just have to cling to his tail if they wanted to finish ahead of him. One lap later, and the Flying Finn decided to come into the pit lane. It was the end of lap 12, which surprised me, had decided to come into the pit lane. And would the undercut work is the question. He found himself behind Sam F1 LFC for the entirety of lap 13, but managed to come out comfortably ahead of the Flying Finn. However, Finn decided to go on to the soft tyres compared to the mediums of Surprise, meaning he'd surely be quicker in this second stint. Surprise was doing everything he could to try and pull away from Finn, and even had a little bit of assistance from his teammate CRL Rosberg. Rosberg was yet to pit, having started on the medium tyres, and gave his teammate a nice little tow as well as a DRS boost at the start of lap 16. He tried to help his teammate further one lap later by trying to defend from the Flying Finn, but those fresh set of soft tyres were far superior to the warm mediums of Rosberg, meaning Finn was just under 2 seconds behind Surprise. Lap 21, and the Flying Finn was within DRS range and within striking range of the Toro Rosso of Surprise. The Mercedes man trying to go down the inside into turn 1, but he'd have to bide his time, but not for long. Around the outside of turn 3 meant that the Mercedes driver, who'd already taken 6 victories this season, was on his way to the 7th if he could hold this lead for the final 15 laps. Lap 27 now, and the battle between NLR Evo and STS F1 Alonso had resumed. Evo looking for a second bite at the cherry after unsuccessfully trying to overtake the Mercedes driver earlier, this time diving it down the inside at turn 3, and some wing damage to the Mercedes of Alonso meant that Tyrrell Martin now fancied a go at him. Sure enough, it didn't take too long for Martin to get a piece of this overtaking action, diving it down the inside at turn 1. But being the wily old fox that he is, STS F1 Alonso fought back into turn 1, but unfortunately for him, the grip on Martin's tyres was just superior, and he managed to get ahead into 5th. Just a few laps from home now, and Drawmaster was staring at the gearbox of STS F1 Alonso. Everyone fancied a bit of the action, including CRL Hamilton, who choked one down the inside, and a brilliant overtake on the McLaren of Drawmaster. Barely a lap later, and the Haas car of Pinecone fancied a go at Drawmaster as well. Going down into turn 3, it was going to be difficult to try and hang it round the outside, but the driver in the Haas, who had incurred no penalties all afternoon, looked as if he was in for a good points finish after dispatching of the McLaren. Now on to the final lap, and the battle for the lead was hotting up once again. The soft tyres on the Flying Finn's car were just starting to degrade, and the mediums on Safrai's were starting to come in to their own, but it was too little too late by the looks of it, not being able to get a run into the final real overtaking zone of turn 3, and as he goes into the final corner now, it was so agonisingly close going into that final turn, getting a better run off the final corner, but it was too little too late for Safrai. And a victory once more for the Flying Finn at Hungary. But boy, was this a close one. It really does barely get closer than that. 4/100ths of a second separated the top two drivers, with AOR Leopard a further 14 seconds almost behind. But a brilliant P3 for the man in the Williams. NLR Evo brought it home in P4 despite a 3-second penalty, and Tyrrell Martin, who also incurred a 3-second penalty, brought it home in P5. Pinecone there in P6, a wonderful performance from him, just ahead of Drawmaster in the McLaren. Solid points for those two, as it was for Sam F1 as well. Who brought it home in P8, also with no penalties. In 9th was STS F1 Alonso, just ahead of Cyril Rosberg, who just about brought it in to the points. Looking at the bottom half of the order, and there was just 12 classified finishers, with EVR Morso and P1R Brown missing out on points. Cyril Hamilton accumulated a lot of penalties and didn't manage to finish the race either, but still, an impressive overtake from him at the chicane was definitely the highlight of his afternoon. VSL Simon, EVR Reynolds and Veloce Limitless also had afternoons to forget, and none of them were classified in the results. Unsurprisingly then, the drivers' standings show that the Flying Finn is still on top with 175 points, nearly double the total now of second place. It is getting towards that stage already in the championship. The NLR Evo just about hangs on to P2, with Safrai's closing the gap once more, just ahead of STS F1 Alonso in P4, with Cyril Rosberg holding on to P5. So no action in terms of movement in the top 5. But the big mover was AOR Leopard, who hadn't scored points since the first 2 races of the season, but moved back up into P6 in the standings, ahead of Veloce Limitless, EVR Morso, EVR Reynolds, and then rounding out the top 10 this week, we have WOR Pinecone, who moved ahead of Danny M7 to get himself into the top half of the order. Onto the constructors, and there was quite a lot of movement in these standings. Most notably, Toro Rosso moving ahead of Ferrari back into P2 as a result of a brilliant drive from Safrai's. Williams also moving up in the standings from 6th to 4th, exchanging positions in fact with Force India. Sauber and Haas also moved up in the standings ahead of Red Bull, with Renault staying there at the bottom on 6 points. So that's a wrap for this Hungarian Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. Join me next week for the Belgian Grand Prix. Hopefully that can be an exciting race. Spa does always spark up a few surprises. And yeah, maybe Surprise can finally get his victory. He came so close today. But join me next week to see whether he can do so. Do take care. Bye-bye.